noches.
Buenas noches.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Bon dia.
Bon dia.
Ni hao.
Ni hao.
Memenjes.
Memenjes.
Dobre utro.
Dobre utro.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Sawadi.
Sawadi.
Chawem.
Chawem.
Manga nangu manga.
Manga manga.
Como ye.
Como ye.
Sopa wanang song.
Sopa wanang song.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Privet.
Privet.
Guten Tag.
Guten Tag.
Calamara.
Calamara.
And as they say in some neighborhoods, what's good?
What's good?
Now the reason why I started off in all those different languages is because drugs do not discriminate.
That's right.
Only people do. Those are all the different various cultures and some of the various cultures that are affected by drugs. And this is an epidemic that is destroying our nation and destroying our cities and destroying our towns and destroying our region. And this is something that we have to tackle. Now, M.K. Asante, who's a great intellectual, he always says, when you make an observation, you have an obligation. When you make an observation, you have an obligation. And today, we have an obligation to tackle and have this courageous discussion on this issue that is affecting our nation and affecting our community. And that is the drug epidemic, which in our nation. Because drugs do not discriminate, only what?
People do.
People.
That's right. So today what we're gonna start off with a very insightful poet. His name is Marco Fabretti. He's an incredible poet from New London, Connecticut, and he's gonna recite a poem on addiction. So let's give him a round of applause.
Dear addiction. I said, dear addiction. You couldn't kill me. Oh, and I'm still smiling. I mean, I'll give you an A for effort, but what I really want to say with you starts with an F. You tried hard. Almost put me in the grave like 4 times, my gosh. But my mom taught me about God, so even in my lows, while I was high, I still saw your lie from out the corner of my eye. You lured me into the jungle with killers and thieves. You took away holidays, birthdays, and you stole memories. You isolated me, left me alone, depressed and hopeless. You took me out of family pictures, dinner table conversations, took my joy, replaced it with suicidal contemplations. You took every single thing we all take for granted daily. Peace of mind, love, the ability to hope whenever it's hard, a car, a license, ability to go wherever I want. Instead, you kept me sick waiting for prescription. It's truly sad watching people waiting for drug dealers to hand over their whole life in a small wax paper bag as they hand over their money and every single thing that they have, including their soul. But you see, your hold on my life was always temporary because Jesus made his home in my heart at a young age. So even while I allowed your house party to take place, deep inside I was always waiting for my dad to come home and serve you papers for your eviction. But now, with everything you took from me, I have double. You took friends, I got a whole city behind me. I accomplished more in a day than I did in a week, more in a month than I did in a year, more in a year than I did in those 10. You took my integrity. Now I'm respected in my weakness. You took my creativity, and now I express myself freely. You took my voice, and now my story's being heard. You took my vision, but now I see my future in HD. You took my career, but now I found my purpose. You stole my youth, but now it's renewed. You stole my dreams, now I soar on eagle's wings. You stole my energy, now when I walk, I don't get weary, and when I run, I do not faint. The moral of the story is that it switches. But it takes strength, courage, and faith to stand up, be different when evil is circling around you and look death square in the face. I've seen many try and fail because of a fall. They didn't know about the I and the L. You see, and the difference it makes. One to take you back farther, while the other make you come back stronger. So which letter do you want to be? It's up to you if you fall or fail. Because if it's a fail, it's an I, meaning it's all about you. But do you know about the fall into his arms and let his love take you through? Get to know the king who has the key to your jail, because to be free means you have to surrender your pride and be able to hear the voice of the truth amongst all these lies. And for those feeling like there's no hope, well, I'm here to stand in the gap. My eyes are not blind. I see you suffering on the other side. And I'm proof that this pain won't last forever. And I'm building a bridge over addiction to come and get you. So that one day, me and you, we could cross back together. And addiction, yes. But to end something, you got to begin something new. Otherwise, this void going to be just too much for you. So my friends, look deep inside and ask yourselves, what will you begin to finally let your addiction end? Thank you.
Let's give Marco Fabretti another round of applause. Dear addiction, powerful words. The former president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, who passed away a couple years ago, he said, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. That's what we're doing tonight. We're educating the masses. And someone I know who is dedicated and highly committed to changing and working in this community and creating awareness to addiction is Representative Joe Dela Cruz. Please, Joe Dela Cruz, give him a round of applause. Please. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I'm not going to be able to rhyme what I'm going to say, but I wish I could. That was absolutely uplifting, and I'm glad that you are on the other side. This is a room that we get to control once a month, and when I spoke to Mr. Booker there, thank you for having this tonight. I think it's a great discussion. Once a month for the last 3 years, in September it was, we meet here as a group, and when he said educating the mass is what we need to do to beat this, it's exactly what has to happen. And we make everybody in our group at the end of our meetings take responsibility. If they learned something that night, if they walked into the group and that they know more about addiction than they did before, or if they become educated in addiction, like I said, we as parents we're PhDs now. I feel like I'm a doctor in addiction. I know my wife feels that way, and most of our group do. But it doesn't mean anything if we don't leave the group that night and pass it on. It doesn't mean anything if we let somebody on Facebook say, look at that junkie, why do we save people with Narcan, why do we do this? It doesn't work if we don't go against those feelings, if we don't educate those people. And what I remind them in the meeting to do is not go after the people with pitchforks and scream and yell and say, you're wrong on addiction. You're wrong. You don't just say that, you tell them why they're wrong. And you tell them that you met someone like Marco, that you saw what it can look like on the other side, that you met somebody in our group that was in addiction for 47 years, and all of a sudden she came out and was able to tell us in our group that she was clean for 5 years, that anything is possible. And those are the types of things that we've learned over the last 3.5 years. Community Speaks Out, this is my little plug at this point, but we meet here in the Groton Public Library the third Wednesday of every month, and we've done that for over 3 years. And what we've learned is the person in addiction, just like someone, if they're a family member and they're knocked out ice cold on the floor, they can obviously not help themselves. We teach the family basically how to get that person that is knocked out on the floor. We teach them how to get the person back up and then walk arm in arm with them over the course of however long it takes. And we've been successful at that because we get to actually introduce people who had lost everything, who were getting thrown in the back of the ambulance by the police for the 5th, 6th, 7th time. And now we'll be able to go back to the police, and we go to the police stations, speak with the police at their, what the heck am I thinking of, the roll calls. So as a group, we're able to go speak to police who don't get to hear the other side of it. Who, I don't know where you did all your stuff, Marco, but there may be a police officer somewhere that helped you that has no idea that you're doing what you're doing tonight. And I think we need to connect the stories, connect the dots. And that's the biggest problem I even see with mankind is we love telling all the bad stories, and we never tell the success stories. And there's a lot more success stories than there are bad stories. I mean, unless something really goes wrong in here and someone throws a podium at each other and this gets out of hand, no one's going to know we were here tonight. And it's a great thing that's happening. And that's what our group is all about. So if you're in addiction or you're looking for help or you want to learn about addiction, come to our group. It's 2 hours once a month. And we have people that just came that had nobody in addiction and walked out saying, wow, I had no idea this was happening. And people who are, outstanding members in our community that were embarrassed that this was happening in their community and they didn't know. And my wife and I were 2 of those people. People that coached, were involved in basketball, baseball. She coached cheerleading. And to find out how bad addiction was in your community because it actually came into your house, that was embarrassing for us. And we got past that embarrassment because we've been fighting it the right way. So thank you guys for being on this panel because I think the star is education and seeing it from all these different points of view. And thank you again for being here because to me, for you to come up here and be able to say those words, it means a lot. And it means the work that we're doing on our side in our group. It means that it is worth something. We know it's worth something, but to see success, it really hits home. So thank you. And yeah. You want the mic back? Because I'll keep it.
Thank you.
Let's give Representative Joe Dela Cruz another round of applause. Awesome. Thank you.
That's awesome.
The other day, I had the opportunity, I was at Toby May Park in New London, Connecticut. And I went to the park and it was snowing. And it was really cold outside. And I'm on the bench and I'm with my little cousin, and he's over there in the playground, like just playing and having fun. And I see this man that's sitting, he's a little disheveled. And this man, so he says, "Sir, can I talk to you for a minute?" And I say, "Yeah." And he starts talking to me. He said, "Can I tell you a story?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, because I thought about my mother used to always tell me, she would say, you can learn something from anyone. You just have to be willing to listen. And he started telling me, he said, "Sir, when I was 12 years old, I used to hate going home. I used to be afraid to go home. He said, when I would get off the school bus, my brother and I, we would wait in the driveway. And we would wait in the driveway because he said, my father was on cocaine and heroin. He used cocaine and heroin. He said, I lived in a 2-family house. And he said, my grandfather used to pass out at the street corner because he would drink so much and he would pee on himself. And he said, my uncle also was on drugs really bad as well in the house. He said, the only person that was really straight in the house was my mom. And I said, wow. And he said, yeah. And he said, what's crazy is as I got older, the only person, he said, it took a while for everyone to really get even clean. And he said, he looked at it and I said, wow, you went through a lot there, right? And he said, yeah, because my brother and I, we would always be afraid to go home. And he said, sometimes we would find needles in the toilet. And he said that went on for years to the point where he said, I knew the police officers by name. That little 12-year-old boy was me. I was that 12-year-old boy. I was that 12-year-old boy who dealt with addiction all his life. My father has only been clean now 10 years. So addiction is very close to my home. And I was the type of kid, when I grew up, I couldn't walk out my neighborhood. Drugs was in my house and also outside my house. There was 30, 40 guys on the street corner, also doing illegal activity as well. So when I talk about drugs, and the reason why I decided to have this discussion today, because this is something I've been dealing with since I was born. So when I say drugs do not discriminate, only people do, I thought about my life and as a grown man now, what I've seen throughout my entire life and how drugs have affected people on so many levels. I've seen so many people lose their life. And lucky I got to see my father now come and blossom into a good positive man by going through detox and getting clean. But it took a long time to get to see him at that level. So it's a blessing from God. But today, we're gonna have an extraordinary discussion, and it's gonna be an educational experience for some of the viewers and listeners out there as well. So I would love for my panelists to introduce yourself, say something about yourself, because we would love for the listeners to know who you are. So we'll start off with Marco's mother here.
So my name is Nancy Fabretti, Marco's mom. He also has a sister, Jennifer, and we have 3 grandchildren from her. I've been married for 37 years. Not an easy thing to do, to stay married 37 years. There's a lot of seasons that you go through in marriage. It's not always the honeymoon, and it's not always rough. Sometimes you have those really sweet spots, but marriage is a commitment, and so is staying clean. And so I'm happy to be asked to come and bring a little hope to you this evening.
Awesome.
So my name is Marco Anthony Fabretti. I'm Nancy's son. I'm originally from New Britain, Connecticut. I moved to New London, Connecticut in 2015, March 3rd to be exact. I went to Stonington Institute. I did the 45-day program. I got relocated in New London, Connecticut, which is really where I started my life at 31 years old. I'm 34 now. So my story with addiction is the past 3 years on and off with relapse, and just figuring out that side of things. When you get clean and when your life is going good and you have so many blessings, and how to handle them and maintain them, and to keep integrity and character. So that's a little bit behind my story right now. And I've been clean for 40 days right now. God is good.
Awesome. Awesome.
Hello, my name is La-Shaunda Hall, and just to brief you up a little bit about myself, I was convicted back in '07 for a crime that I didn't do, but by the plea bargain system in Connecticut, I took an 8-year sentence. At that time, I did 7.5 years flat. With 6 months, the max, they drop a shower door on me in SAG. My motto was go big or stay home. So from a young girl, due to addiction, I was forced to sell narcotics to take care of my siblings. At the age of 22, I was raising 4 children, 2 of my own and 2 that I took due to addiction. I'm on this panel tonight because education and strength and hope and faith is something that kept me when I was behind them bars, and has now kept me almost 5 years in society. When I left the prison in 2013, I had no clue of what I was going to do due to the injury that occurred in prison with the shower door falling on me. At that time, I walked over to 3 Rivers Community College to ask anyone if I could speak to children about why the street don't love you, and neither does that addiction. It doesn't pick out race, it doesn't pick out nationality, it doesn't pick out whether you're rich or you're poor. The addiction attacks anybody that allow it, because it's the enemy and it comes to steal, kill, and destroy. So when I met Mr. Booker, I was straight out of Niantic Women Prison with a metal rod in my neck and was told I wasn't gonna walk again. So all I had was a hope and a prayer that God will see me through, like he did many nights as I battled not going to sleep because of molestation that took place because of this addiction. So it was Mr. Booker that told me that whatever strength I had that made me walk across that street to talk to them children about why the streets don't love you, and neither does that addiction, I don't know where I would be today, because I'm proud to say I've been a student at 3 Rivers since I walked out of Niantic Women Prison in 2013, and December 9th will be 5 years that I've been in a society where I see not only am I looking for a second chance, but our youth are too.
Wow.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carolyn Wilson. I'm with Ledgelight Health District. I'm a health educator there, and I'm the coordinator for the Groton Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention. I lived in Groton for a while, and now I live in New London. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Priscilla Milesi, and I am the New London Community and Campus Coalition Coordinator. I am also employed by the state for the Department of Consumer Protection Liquor Division, so I do enforcement and help with putting people in businesses to work as well, and I help with the permits. To speak about me a little bit is just, I'll keep it brief, but I was originally raised in Brooklyn, New York, moved here in '97. I have 2 children. I've been happily married for 27 years. And I got involved in this work, not only because of the work that I do for the state, and I saw that there was an issue with underage drinking at that time, but also when I grew up in Brooklyn, there were also issues that I've seen. And I find that there are no mistakes or coincidences. Sometimes you're put in certain roles to do certain things. I do have 2 children. Some of which I wish sometimes that we would have had education to address certain issues that kids are going through. So I felt like it was my responsibility I really just took this job as a part-time gig, frankly, but it kind of really consumed me, and I felt that I saw the need, not only for my personal reasons, but I also saw the need in the community in New London. And I figured I'm in a position to do that. And so I've been fortunate enough to not only get a lot of training and put some of the training and experiences that I've had to further use, but I've also been able to meet certain people in the community that are just as passionate. So I think that's enough about me for right now, but I just think that this was a wonderful experience, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Awesome panel. On Monday, November 26, 2018, in the New York Times, article read, drug deaths are way down in an opioid hotspot. Why? And Dayton, Ohio. So they're talking about how drug deaths are going down, right, in Dayton, Ohio. But when you really look at the national epidemic, the deaths have not gone down. And it's really sad when you look at the amount of people who have died. In the state of Connecticut, there's been an increase since 2015. And it has even increased even more when you look at the data that's going to come out by the end of the year. So my question to our extraordinary panel right here is, what does the drug crisis mean to you? And how has it changed your perspective on life? Anyone, you can take a stance on that.
Again, like I said, and Marco pointed out, drug addiction does not discriminate. I feel like a lot of resources and a lot of programs that give the tools and education for people to stay clean has took a lot of cuts. So a lot of the education and a lot of the help that used to be available when you were battling your addiction has been cut from the government payroll. So due to that happening, it's been a lot more incarceration instead of programming. And I feel if Connecticut put more into helping parents and helping people of any race and any issues with addiction, with funding, it could change the epidemic of our drug overdose and suicide death due to drugs.
Totally.
So I'd like to say that the drug epidemic in our household, because that's what I can really speak to, it changed the makeup of our household completely. We went from a family that really loved to get together. Marco loved to play baseball. You know, we were always at the park and things like that, to all of a sudden, nobody wants to go home. We're walking on eggshells, not really sure what kind of words are going to set Mark off. What kind of condition is he going to come in home today? What's going to happen next? So all of a sudden, the panic that comes over you and the anxiety that comes over you can really start to make you sick. And the Word of God says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. And anyone who has waited for change, maybe in themselves or in a loved one, and doesn't see it and sees that cycle over and over and over again, that hope starts to die within you. And you start thinking that nothing is ever going to change. And it actually gets to the point where you almost want that overdose just to happen, just so you can get regular life back again, you know? But I'm here to tell you that there is hope, and there are many places that we can turn to, and there are excellent programs that we can take a look at to indulge, and we need to talk about it. And that's the thing, because I found that my family, they were talking about it, about how I was handling the situation. They were all talking about it amongst themselves, but nobody called me. No one called me to ask me, how are you doing with this? But everyone had an opinion about how I should be handling it. I wanted to tell you that I'm the kind of mom who, you know, you ended up in jail. I'm not bailing you out. I told the officer, you better put the fear of God back into that boy, because I am bailing you out. So he sat there over the Easter holiday. And it was only by God's grace that on Monday he didn't face going to another incarceration place. So I'm not that kind of mom. I'm the kind of mom that says there's consequences to our actions. But you know what? We need to love people who have found themselves into this addiction, because as I watched Mark, I watched and I saw how there were times that he really could not stop. So we have to talk about that and find out how to get to that place. I told Mark that when the wall went up in his conscience and he just decided that he was going to go out and do that, we have to figure out what to do prior to that. Because I can only equate it to trying to stop smoking. You know, I've been cigarette-free for, 20 years, right? But it was really hard to put those cigarettes down because they were everywhere. And it was socially acceptable. And it was really hard, but there was something I had to do. I had to change my thinking. I had to change, not my environment, because that's not going to change, but I had to change my thinking, and I had to change my habits. I had to create new habits, clean habits, and that's how I attacked that. So we talked to Mark about doing the same things, and I don't mean to monopolize the conversation, but I just wanted to share with you that there is hope. We can change, okay? There is hope.
So what the drug crisis means to me is that there's underlying issues like my mom talked about in a personal level. And it's a heart condition. That's what it is. So the drug crisis is a heart condition because once you get clean or away from your environment or sober for, say, some amount of days, you now have a decision to make, and it's within your own ability. You're not under the chaos of addiction anymore. You have this issue right here. It's, do I want to go do this, or do I want to go to Easter Sunday dinner with my mom and dad clean and in my right mind? So it means to me that there's underlying issues within each of us that we need to fix, and there's a healer. How has it changed my perspective on life? It means I got work to do. You know, I'm above ground. I'm clean. I know the truth. I carry the light. So I have to go out there on a mission and help those who are stuck and feel like it's hopeless, because I felt like it was hopeless too. But we're not there today. Thank God the story switches.
The story switches.
That's right. You know, for years, I watched my dad go in and out of rehab, you know, and try to get help. And, you know, some of the words that resonated in my head was, you know, get clean, trying to find an excellent program, not losing hope. And I remember one year, you know, he hit rock bottom, right? And he said to me, he's like, you know, I'm trying to get clean, but I can't get clean if I need to go into a program. So he said, you know, Kevin, I gotta go shoot up now before I admit myself in the program, because you know what, they're not gonna accept me because I don't have insurance. That's the only way they're gonna allow me to get in the program at St. Francis. And I never forget that. So I had to go see him. He was already clean an hour before. When I saw him and I spoke to him, an hour later he was high. And I never forgot that in my head. And I'm, you know, being a teacher, and I'm already a teacher at that point, and I got to see my father before I go to work, and he's high. And I remember sitting there saying to myself, the system is so messed up. So, and the question I have for the panel, you know, and this is something, like I said, I've been doing for years. So the question I have for you, what can we do about programs such as people who are poor, who do not have insurance, who need to go to rehab? What kind of programs can we offer for them? And should rehab be more than 20-something days? And why? Please.
Real quick. I'm not a state representative, so I can't really say what we should do for people without insurance. But I feel like I know of people who have been in that position. I got to go take a bunch of shots or do some drugs to go to rehab today. And I feel like if you're in a position where you feel like you're going to use, or your environment is getting crazy, and you feel like you need to go away for a period of time and get help, you should be able to walk into a rehab and say, "Listen, I'm clean, but I don't want to get high, and I need somewhere to stay."
Yeah, I need help.
End up dead on the street.
To talk about the insurance and what Mr. Booker questioned was, how do you get help if they don't see that you have a problem? I battled not only with the addiction that was in my childhood, I also battled the addiction myself, where because I was a dealer, I didn't think I had a problem because I had access to it and I could get it when I wanted, and I knew how to flim-flam the system to get it. So what I'm trying to say is, it was hard for me to accept I even had an addiction, let alone try to go say I need help for it. So what came into play when I did go get high, to get in a program, to get a bed, to detox, to go through everything I went through, I got kicked out of the program because the drug I did wasn't qualified as a drug that you would risk your soul or commit suicide. I smoked marijuana, and I believe that marijuana was my coping method to deal with all the abuse that I endured due to this addiction. I also then at that point decided that it had to be something wrong with me, that my parents got high. So I started self-afflicting pain on myself, where at that time I found out that I couldn't get a regular program because I didn't have regular issues. I dealt with the mental health crisis that Connecticut is not dealing with, that most people that battle addiction has a mental health illness, and them are the first budget cuts that has taken place since I've been out of incarceration in 2013 to the day that I'm speaking now. Mental health is one of the first places that they cut. And when you have a mental health issue, you self-medicate with the drugs from the streets because you don't want to deal with what my brother Marco said, your inner being. And your inner being will lead you back to that addiction quicker than you could blink your eye because, again, you need to be high to detox. So do I think it's fair that you have to go get high to go get help? No. But the issue is, how do we address getting help if you don't have insurance and you don't want to use to get in a program?
So for Carolyn and Priscilla, because I know you guys, both of you are extremely active in the community, your organizations, your programs, you're doing great work. So what are some of the steps one can take to get help for drug addiction? And from your research and from some of the things that you have noticed within the community. Let's say, just focusing here in Eastern Connecticut.
Go ahead, Ms. Carolyn.
Sure. So getting help. So in prevention, we don't spend a lot of time talking about treatment and recovery, but prevention, treatment, and recovery are all very important parts of the whole continuum of addiction. I think the first thing you have to do is admit that you have a problem. I think that's usually the first step you have to take. I think for parents, when they have perhaps a teenager that they think may have a problem, it's good to know what to look for and to ask for help. Here in Groton and in New London County, we have some amazing resources, one of which is Community Speaks Out, and people helping people is a very, very powerful thing. And if you don't know how to navigate the system, if you don't know what to do, there are other people who can help you. There are people you can ask who've gone through the same thing. And I think that's one of the best things to do.
Thank you.
Well, I have to agree with Carolyn. I mean, admitting you have a problem is one thing, because that means you're showing you're ready for the next step, which is the long road of recovery. So admitting that you do have a problem, I think, is the first thing that people have to do. And then for me, for the most part, with the coalition, we deal with youth and prevention and education. Can't tell you I'm an expert on exactly what needs to happen next because I'm not. But I do know people that have. And I do have to say, in our community right now, there are a lot of resources. You have Ledgelight Health District that has an what's her name, Jeannie Milstein, who's in Human Services. There are people in the community that do have the resources and the information that parents need, and not just parents. I mean, it could be an adult, or, you know, we have an age group by the age that's between the age of 18 and 25 that is not really addressed, I want to say. We do deal with teens, but our teens have ranged between, I want to say, 12 to 18 or just about under 18. But that demographic between 18 and 25, I have not found that there has been a lot of resources and information for them, because once they hit 18, they're adults. And this is when we're finding that they're dipping and dabbling in drug use and alcohol use. And, you know, we don't know if that's starting at that point, or is it something that's just been increasing with the fact that they are now 18 years old and it's easily attainable. So that area, there are a lot of people. I believe it's Access in New London that would help that age group. But I find that to me, once you know you have an issue and you're ready, you really, really want to reach out into the community, because they're here. The same way we're here right now and nobody knows we're here, but if people were to talk and they said, you know, they invite another person or they ask, you know, you will find the help that you need, and the resources are there.
Awesome, thank you. And Marco, how did you learn about certain options, you know, as far as where to go, access to get help and recovery? Like, what are some of the steps that you took?
When I moved out here to New London, first place I went to was a church. And my roommate introduced me to a pastor who did like a hip hop church. They had music artists come in, and, you know, I'm gifted poetically and I like to make music. So I got plugged in with kind of like my gifts and talents. And around there I found people who could help and support me. And from there I started serving in the community. My mom used to tell me, take the focus off yourself. Once you take the focus off yourself, it doesn't become about you anymore, your addiction, your issues. It helps. It's not like you want to keep that focus off because you don't deal with yourself. But right there, I started serving in the community. And New London had a lot of places to go serve, a lot of events. We were doing Fulton Park. We did City Fest. I was able to express and use my talent there. So once I was able to see that I can do things in life other than get high, and that I could discover myself. And so I say get plugged in with your local church community, because from there you could start to serve. And when you start to serve, things open up. You meet people, you know, you go different places, and you meet a community of friends. I met a young adults group, and from the ages of 18 to 35, that's what young adults are. And I got plugged in with them. We had a Wednesday night study that we did, and we went paintballing. I did stuff I never got to do, you know, because of this addiction. And so I started to live life. And that was my network. And I went to meetings too. I did everything that there was available. So that's where it started, though, for me.
Awesome. Good job. And as his mom, you know, what comes to my mind right away, you know, because I think about a lot of parents I know, and I think about even spouses that I know who are dealing with maybe their husband or their wife being addicted, you know, and some people just like, I'm done. I can't deal with this anymore. I've been dealing with this for years. What advice do you have for some of those listeners out there who are just like, I'm tired, I can't take it anymore. It's too much. This person, they deleted my entire account, they're using all my money, they steal everything in the house. I just can't take it. Is there any hope that you can give them, or any words of advice, words of encouragement?
Well, let me share with you. This system and this world will give you all the opportunities to give up and let go. Don't do it. Well-meaning people suggested that I should give up. My own heart told me it's too much and it hurt too much. My mind told me it didn't make sense to hope any longer. But in Job, it says, though he slay me, yet I will hope. You see, the doctors tried to tell me that my son would have to be placed in a lifetime of methadone or Suboxone to control his heroin addiction. They tried to tell me that the impulse was too strong to break on his own, and he would never be free from the effects of that drug. And they were right. On his own, it was way too much. But we are not alone. We who profess Christ as our Savior and Lord are never alone. So therefore, we hope against all hope. And as the scripture and song says, for I know whom I have believed in, and am persuaded he is able to keep that which I've committed unto him against that day. So we need to hold unswervingly to the hope that we profess. We need to meditate on God's word so that his word can change our thinking and can bring truth and stop the lie. See, the enemy would like you to think that this is all there is to life, right? He'd like you to think that that's who you are, you're broken, you can't be fixed. That's what the enemy would like you to think. But that's not true. That's not true because each and every person has been born with a purpose. And so we need to find out our purpose and our giftedness, and we need to walk in that. And we need to help those whom we love and have this problem. And they're not broken either. It's just that they have picked up a habit, much like my smoking habit got picked up. Marco picked up this habit. Now, my family didn't kick me out of the house because of it. Granted, we had to walk through that, and he went to Bridgeport Rescue Mission and a few other things because, you know, if you abuse the family privilege, you don't get family privileges. So I just, yes. So I just want to share with you that, you see, in Proverbs it says there's a contrast. Hope deferred does make the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. So here is my longing fulfilled, that my son now, and it's a day by day, just like everybody, right? Doesn't most of society tend to cope? You know, you had a hard day, you go out and have a couple of drinks. Well, that's an addiction too. I mean, that's not really a good thing to do, really, to go out and just get hammered on a Friday night, right? That's not a good, clean lifestyle. No, why not go out and serve your community instead on a Friday night? I had a long day, you know, what can I do for somebody else? Because like Mark was saying, we need to take the focus, when we are addicts and we are caught in that, take the focus off of yourself. And when you start to look at others, you see that, wow, there's life outside of my own myopic view, you know? Yes.
Your own imprisonment.
Your own imprisonment, yes.
Touched on a subject that made me interrupt, but not really interrupt.
Go ahead.
But prison is in your mind.
Yes.
And when I got sentenced to my 8 years, when the judge said 8, I looked at the judge and I told him to hurry up and hit the hammer, because I had been in the system mentally from the age of 13 to 35 when I got my 8 years. So mentally, I had been in my own prison before I even received my sentence. And during my sentence, I did majority of my time in SEG, so I could get the concept of why when I got out, I didn't want to do the same action to get the same result, because that's insanity.
That is insanity.
So when I realized that the prison was no longer the four walls that confined me, and it was in me, I looked outside of myself. And that's where I found where she speaks about in the word. I fit in right with Job, where I had no one else to call on in that cell but Jesus to come in and clean me out from the inside to the outside. Because it's something that you don't see in that addiction. It's something within us that we're trying to cover up. So that cigarette feel good, she talked about that. That drink feel better, because that defocus us off of what's hurting us so bad that we want to numb it. So now anything that we can now imprison ourselves with by numbing is our addiction. And I wanted to say I wasn't addicted to a drug, but I was addicted to what came with that selling drug lifestyle. So when you ask me, how did I get help? I literally had to accept in jail, you don't touch money. You get a white slip, so you hope the mail lady came to work that day. So when I came home, money wasn't important to me. when you did 7.5 years and you didn't touch it. I came home to life being important to me because I had a second chance. And that's what I lost due to this addiction. A second chance at being who I was born to be, my purpose. And that's where I found it at Three Rivers Community College, where I've been working on my degree since I met Mr. Booker in 2013 when I walked out of that prison.
I just want to touch on the fact that we were talking about, people that are affected by drugs, but we're also should think about, and since I deal with the youth, and I also see this regularly, I should say, there are some youth that come through the Juvenile Review Board, because I'm the chairperson for that as well, that come through New London. A lot of the kids, we're talking about adults, but kids are just as equally as affected, if not more so. And what happens is when, as an adult or a parent, a cousin, or someone is addicted to drugs, there is an effect that takes hold on the child. Discussing it with them and having them, remember, a lot of people when they're in addiction do not listen to children or ask how are you feeling or ask, what they think about a certain topic or what's happening in their home. So I've been fortunate enough through the Juvenile Review Board that some of these things, they may be brought to us for smoking weed and they're only 13. But that's only the catalyst that brings them to the Juvenile Review Board. It's not really the reason why they're there. So we're talking about using drugs to mask certain things and certain situations that occur. We see that this is also affecting the youth. So the decisions that adults are making to continue to use is not just affecting them, it's affecting their children and their families. So I think that for the youth, it's one of those things that the education, the prevention, the counseling, all of that stuff has to take place, not just for you, but as a family unit. It has to be everyone engaged in recovery, because even though the child is not using, it is affected by the drugs, and like you were, I want to say, in your example, you were around it. You were fortunate enough to not fall into it. But typically, if you're in a socioeconomic position where, you don't have opportunities, you don't see hope, what is there? You only do what you see around you. And if people are not strong enough or have the resources and the support to help the youth, know that there's a better way, through prevention, education, having a mentor, having a counselor, someone as a support group, it's easy to kind of fall back into the same, madness.
Absolutely. So just to piggyback off what you're saying there, when you think about a lot of our young people, they'll say, well, Mr. Booker, smoking weed is not a bad thing. The state of Colorado has legalized marijuana, Mr. Booker. California, Mr. Booker, has legalized marijuana. Massachusetts recently, just a week ago, has legalized marijuana, Mr. Booker. And Connecticut will slowly follow as well, right?
Not with the dispensary.
Right. So when we look at what's going on throughout our country, and I remember, lucky I had a strong family who would always say to me, Kevin, weed is the gateway drug to other drugs. So, my mom would put the fear in my life. And she would say, look at your family members, look around what's going on. Okay, so I never smoked because it would just frighten me. I didn't want to end up like what I saw, right? So the question I have for you, all of you extraordinary individuals on this panel, when you think about marijuana, do you think marijuana should be legalized, right, or not? In your opinion, and I really want your honest opinion on this one, okay? Please.
The first drug I ever did was I smoked weed. And here we are battling heroin addiction, okay? And we'll also talk about little compromises. If I get in a car and I don't put my seatbelt on one day, I start driving around. Next thing you know, I start speeding around with no seatbelt. Next thing you know, I got the music loud, speeding around, no seatbelt. breaking a couple laws, a little compromises. Next thing you know, I get in an accident with no seatbelt, with the music loud, speeding around. And what happens? I hurt myself, hurt somebody else, all because what? I went from a responsible individual wearing my seatbelt, following the law, going the speed limit, stopping at stop signs. That's how I see it, little compromises. So if you start smoking weed, also it makes you a lazy individual. I don't know who smokes weed and is out there being a productive member of society.
But Marco, can I play devil's advocate?
Sure
for a
you
moment,
can.
Please?
Yes, you can.
But the marijuana that's being made right now in our dispensaries, right? It hasn't been cut down on the streets like you see in the black market. So it hasn't been different chemicals poured in there. So it's, it's grown naturally, Marco. So it's not going to have the same
gonna make you smarter.
effects.
You're gonna want to go to
It's not gonna have
college.
the same effects that you may have encountered in your own life, within your life, Marco. So how do you feel about that?
Well, if you got some special marijuana where people are reading books and hitting the library, let me know. I might go get a degree in some marijuana.
So this is an interesting one for me in prevention, and I think, a lot of people in this room will agree that, we're living in a really interesting time right now with drug policy. And right now, prevention professionals, we are more on the side of not liking legalization because of the effects on society and especially youth. We are always focused on youth. Well, people say if it's being legalized for adult use, not recreational use, we don't like to say recreational use, for adult use, then that doesn't affect kids. Well, it absolutely does. Youth have really never ever had a problem accessing drugs and alcohol, especially with marijuana now. It's increased access, we know, increases risk of use. Another issue that we're having with youth right now, it's not even legal in Connecticut yet, but kids are watching, they're paying attention. Their perception of harm, which is a fancy way of saying they don't think it's harmful, is out of control. We track youth perceptions and attitudes in surveys. And we're making really great progress in a lot of areas. One area we're not having progress in is perception of harm. So we're going in the wrong direction there. So it makes our job really difficult when we're creating educational campaigns and conducting curriculums and working with youth. It's definitely an uphill battle. And we know it's really important. So people say, oh, it's just weed. Well, a very popular thing that we're talking about now is it's not the weed that some people are thinking about what was available 20, 30, 40 years ago, that people sort of look back on and sort of think of, oh, it was fun and no one got hurt. The THC, the addictive and psychoactive chemical in marijuana, has gotten very potent. And the level of intoxication you get from that is completely different ballgame than what it ever used to be. And we mostly focus on youth effects. So we think about learning, memory, cognition. Those are sort of the things that we like to focus on when we're talking to youth. They're very quick to compare it to alcohol. They're very quick to compare it to heroin. And we have to say, you can't really compare apples to oranges. They work differently in the body. But it's not harmless. And don't believe anybody who says it's harmless, because it's just not true. And, we're fighting a lot of messages from the industry. They outspend us. Their messages are, and their lobbying efforts are winning, and we're not. But it's really important to understand that, I know people get excited about things like revenue, but you have to be realistic about what that actually could look like, and what are the social costs involved. And, public policy, you have an opportunity to keep people safe. You have an opportunity to promote public health. And in the midst of a drug epidemic, we have to be very careful about how we frame things. So, we see it as a challenge to us, in what we do with prevention. We're working on it very hard, but, we don't see it as a positive thing, especially for our youth.
I just want to chime in a little bit on that because, one of the things that I specifically promote whenever we're showing slideshows or events and we're educating the youth. It's not just that, I'm not a prude. I'm not going to say that, don't do drugs or say no or whatever. The thing is, I want you to, because once they're adults, they're adults. They're going to be able to make their decisions. But an educated decision is better than one that people, you go ahead and make a decision and you don't even know what you're making a decision about. So showing them the effects of marijuana on the body, on the brain, what it does to the brain, because a full mature brain is not developed until age 25. So if you're starting at 13, 14, 15, you're really, slowing down the growth of your brain. So one of those things, those are one of the things that I focus on. Another thing is when we get the discussion about, because we also have a youth council, so we get a lot of this from the youth, because what we do in the youth council is we train the youth to, as facilitators of the same thing that we're talking about right now, and then they are the facilitators for their demographic and their schools. And so once they're knowledgeable about the prevention piece of not just marijuana, but all the other drugs, we have more kids that we've gotten from our survey results that don't do drugs than the ones that we're highlighting that do. Because I mean, right now we're talking about the negative effects that, people who do it. But I do want to just, throw in there that we have more kids that don't. We do have more kids that don't. And one of the things that I think that we need to highlight is because they're not the minority. They're the majority, to be perfectly honest, that are not using. So I think in our campaigning, in our media, and all this thing about, because if it's going to be legal, it's going to get legal. But I think we can still do our prevention work and continue to have the majority educated and continue to have the majority of our kids make the decision not to engage. And they do that freely from their own will, the same way they joined our youth council, because they want the change in their communities and in their schools. So for me, I mean, I have an opinion on this whole marijuana legalization. Whether or not it's going to bring revenue, that's a great thing, but the same kind of revenue that we're going to bring in, we're going to have to put out to put people into rehab. So, I mean, I just don't understand it. I don't think that, the legislators and the people that are voting to have it legalized are really thinking of that. They're thinking more of the short-term revenue. So, I mean, those are just my opinions. I just think that we have to continue to do the prevention, the education, and that's really where the key is going to be, and really letting the kids in our area, in our region, know that they are the majority. They're not the minority. Not everybody's doing it, and the surveys prove that. It's in the data. That's why we collect data.
That's good. Thank you. All right. Last question before we open up to the audience here. In the 1980s, Ronald Reagan would actually get on TV and he would say, and I remember this vividly, very clear, we have a war on drugs. Mm-hmm. We have a war on drugs. And his wife, Nancy Reagan, would come around and they had these campaign ads and these commercials with the frying egg, this is your brain. And this is your brain on drugs. Any questions? And when you look at the 1980s, the face of the addict was a lot different. The face of the addict was brown and black. And 30 years, 30 years later, the face of the addict is a lot different. And it's affecting certain communities that it did not affect before. And now we look at treatment instead of before, we looked at it was a war on drugs. And in Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, she said how the prison population in the 1970s was 300,000. It went up to 2 million by the 1990s. And most of the individuals who got incarcerated, who were incarcerated in the 1980s and early 90s was because of drug charges. So the question I have for my awesome panel here is, why do you think we discriminate but drugs do not? And how can we create an awareness for everyone to see that drugs harm everyone, no matter your social economic status, race, religion, or gender? It is a monster that is here to destroy. So how can we create awareness? Because when you think about it, in the state of Connecticut, we have 169 towns. 20 towns are where people of color are concentrated. And that's just a fact. 149 towns are predominantly all white in the state of Connecticut. I'm not going to go into the historical reasons behind that, because that's another panel. That's another discussion, okay? But there's a reason why everything was structured that way, even within our state. So, and now money is pouring into those other towns, the other 149 towns now, because of treatment, therapy, all the other things that 30 years ago was we need to incarcerate these individuals in these other 20 towns, okay? That's just a fact. That was a national epidemic that our nation now is dealing with. What can we do to create awareness so that we do not repeat this cycle for the future? Because the reality is generations that are coming up now do not know the history, okay? I got to live through it. I got to experience it, and I still remember this clearly, okay? Because I know a lot of individuals who were incarcerated because of that. So please educate the audience and the listeners.
So my thing was, I did my paper on legalizing marijuana when I first started Three Rivers. I'm now doing another paper, and I'm what they will call compare and contrast. Now I have did education and learned about marijuana. No, it should not be legalized in Connecticut due to the fact your brain stops developing. So if you do a drug at the age of 12, your brain has now stopped giving the endorphins to grow into a productive citizen of society. I am against legalizing marijuana because it is a gateway drug. I feel that marijuana covers, it's like a Band-Aid to a scar that needs stitches, and I believe a lot of our youth are turning to it because it's a social drug. And due to the social network that's missing in the home front, they're turning to their friends, it's peer pressure, and they want to fit in. So what I say about legalizing marijuana is because, yes, your brain stops developing, and what can we do to stop Connecticut from legalizing it is also understand that they're putting chemicals in it for it to be legalized anyway and taking out stuff that most people are looking for. So when you get the education behind legalizing marijuana and understand why most kids turn to marijuana, is because they want to fit in. They're being bullied. It's something going on in their home or even in their school system that now marijuana has been looked at as a cool drug. No, it's not, because your brain does not develop once you take in anything that takes the normal endorphins out your brain that needs to work as you grow up. And like she said at the end of the panel, your brain doesn't fully develop. So if you take any child that now think because it's legal, like marijuana, like alcohol, like cigarettes, that's our #1 death right now, nicotine, we're not going to look at how easy it would be to be addicted.
I want to just talk on for a minute about the incarceration rate. And I think that, to be perfectly honest, this whole, and you broke it down so that, you know, a few years ago, you're right, it was just in certain areas, and incarceration was the answer. We weren't thinking about treatment. But you're right, it was in minority areas for the most part. Now it's shifted. It's in your backyard now. So now it's in everybody's yard. It's not just the black and brown people. And this has been around for years. This is not a new epidemic. This is an epidemic that has different faces right now, maybe. And maybe it's in different socioeconomic, you know, homes and you know, but for me, this is not a new thing. What's new is, like I mentioned, it is new because it has now gotten into suburban America. It's gotten into different homes. It's come in really many, it starts with the opiates, and that's the issue. The issue here is the prescription drugs. And because it's gotten to that point through the prescription opiates, and opioids, this is why now it's become such a big deal. And it is a big deal, and I'm not trying to downplay it, but I'm just saying that now is when we have to figure out, now we don't want to put people in jail. Now the thing is we got to get them help, which should have happened a long time ago, but it didn't. So my thing is, we have to just educate, again, through whether that be somebody comes in to get help, they go into their doctors, we have to control, which is happening right now, the number of prescriptions that people are being issued based on, you know, injuries. There's quite a few reasons why that's happened. But frankly, incarcerating people for drug addiction is definitely not the answer, because there are drugs in jail too. So I mean, it's not like it's not like they're going to give you treatment in jail. You know, they're just going to put you on another source that just band-aids it until you know, they get out. And then when they get out, they pour into our communities, and then they need help. So, I mean, if they're going to incarcerate them for whatever the reasons are, then give them the treatment they need in the jails. But that's not what happens. So, I mean, I just have to put it out there because that's the way, you know, that's the reality of what it is.
Yeah, and I'd like to build on that. It's really important that we learn from our mistakes and learn from history, of course, absolutely. And I like that you brought up, you know, the 80s and some of the campaigns that we were seeing. And, you know, what's funny, I think we've definitely looked at those as an example of what not to do. But if you think about the take-home messages from those, we still use them now in prevention. Prevention science has gotten a lot better. We know a lot more than we ever did. But if you think about this is your brain on drugs, what have we kept talking about tonight is brain development, right, and addiction, right? So the way it was delivered and you know, the campaign was, we'll call it ineffective, but that message is still something we're talking about. Same with just say no. You know, obviously that's cheesy and an example of probably not what to do, but we still talk about refusal skills. We still talk about peer pressure. We still talk to kids and let them know that they have choices and how they're going to handle uncomfortable situations. So, you know, it didn't work in the 80s. You know, it was a bad delivery, but these are still things that are important when we educate and we take a look at prevention. So obviously, you know, we always want to prevent issues before they start. So we certainly don't want to destroy people's lives even more so, in addition to addiction and substance abuse issues, and have them incarcerated and just have their lives challenged even more by that. So it's really important that we spend a lot of time and energy on education, on prevention, talk about the consequences of drug addiction, but also talk about choices and mental health, like you were saying, and all the different things that play into this. We have to have open and honest conversations with kids. They're not stupid. And, you know, we need to have open dialogue and let them know that, give them the facts, but let them know if something happens and they make a bad decision, that they can talk to a trusted adult and we can help them take it from there. So, you know, certainly we want to learn from our mistakes, but, you know, but yeah, it's
I just want to add
multifaceted.
something. One of the things that I found in dealing with the kids and the youth survey, the youth council, we also have the Students Against Destructive Decisions. One of the things that we found about that and what's happening in the schools as well as in the home, one component that I found that they all have that's missing are life skills. Life social skills. These kids do not have any life skills whatsoever, and we're finding that it's missing. I don't know if the parents think that it's supposed to be taught in school, or there's no time because the parents are working very, very hard. A lot of these kids stay home by themselves. They really don't know. It's a component that I find It's just mind-boggling that they're missing, and a lot of these kids need that nowadays because of the peer pressure, because they're by themselves most of the time. They really don't have these skills, and these skills is really what's, it's not taught in school. These are things that parents have to teach their children. They have to teach them, you know, how to deal and cope with situations. They don't know how to cope when they, you know, because they either, their parents, like I mentioned, are not home, they are on video games, they're tuned out, they're just don't really have suffer consequences in a way, I want to say. And that's a component that you learn from. We're too busy trying to shelter them so that they don't fall and scrape their knees. Sometimes they do have to fall and scrape their knees because that's how you learn. And we are always trying to prevent them from hurting. So here's a pill for that. Or, you know, you can't, you know, we're always, and I don't mean just the parents, I'm saying even, you know, in school, we really don't have a lot of consequences. I just don't, there's not a lot of life skills, and that's why the only way I'm going to leave it, because I mean that's like for another panel, but I'm just saying that is a component that is certainly missing, and why kids need to be able to go through these experiences in their lives to be able to cope when things don't go a certain type of way, so they don't have to go and turn to smoking weed or drinking or taking a pill to feel okay.
Shonda and then Marco.
I wanted to say that a lot of reason Colorado and California did legalize marijuana, it wasn't to give them recreational use of a drug. It was to stop the crime rate. So what they felt, though, that they could do, when you look at America as a whole, I learned in history, we make up 5% of America. And 25% of Latinos and African American is in the prison system due to crimes that are looked at as white-collar crimes, but at the end of the day, Colorado and California legalized it so they could bring their crime rate down. Connecticut hasn't looked at what it would do not only to our crime rate, but what it would do to our society as our kids, like I said, it stunts their growth. So it's not a bigger issue for Connecticut because they're looking at the crime rate over what they get at the dispensary for the same drugs that's being sold on the street. So I just feel like legalizing it is not going to stop the crime rate. Legalizing it is going to jeopardize our youth to feel like it's open for anything else that's a peer pressure drug that could lead them into a larger addiction.
Marco?
I just keep staring at the question. It says, why do you think we discriminate but drugs do not? And I thought about this young man at my church, this young kid who loves me. And he's in my youth group, and he's autistic. And we love him. We love him. He's autistic. Nobody is sitting here saying, why does he keep talking to me? Why do he keep saying Marco 15 times in a minute? You know what I mean? Why does he keep on Marco? I did it. You know, repeating the same. Nobody, I mean, we deal with it and we love him. So why do we discriminate? Because I think people have this idea like, you picked the drugs. The drugs didn't pick you. Mm-hmm. You got to pay the consequences. But with my boy Ricardo, this autism picked him. He didn't pick autism. So think about that. And like what she was saying, and people, young people, something happens. They don't learn to cope. They don't learn life skills in some houses. Man, we worked at Benny Dover book. We've seen some things. Listen, there's young people that coming in there hurting. They don't even have breakfast in the morning or clothes to wear.
You're right.
So what's going to happen if you're in a family that you don't even, I came from a great family. It's not, that's a different story. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have, but things happen in my life. Mm-hmm. So if you can't cope, you're going to turn to something. And another thing I wanted to share was just no cancer patient gets healed from cancer and raises their hand and says, my name is Marco, I have cancer. You're celebrating your victory over cancer. So if you're in addiction today and you're free from active addiction, I mean, you're not manipulating your mother, you're not running the Hartford back and forth in an Uber, you're not doing crazy things that people do in active addiction. If you have freedom in your mind from that today, you're an overcomer. That's right. You're not an addict anymore. You are victorious. The story switches. I don't know any cancer patient that raises their hand and says, my name is so-and-so, I have cancer, when they've been healed from a doctor. That's right. So I'm just saying,
Amen.
you don't have to be that person. Your identity is not, my identity today is not a drug addict. Oh, I know I could go back to that if I so choose. Now, I learned how to cope. So if I have all these tools and I go back to that, well, shame on me, I guess.
Deep. And that was also what I wanted to touch on. A lot of these younger kids don't have people like us on this panel, me and Marco, for instance, that been on the other side, and the gratefulness is gone. I look at these youth today, and I don't see anyone grateful that they woke up. When I wake up in the morning, I'm grateful that I woke up in my right mind, and I'm not behind prison walls. So today, I see that the children are losing their faith and their hope in adults that are put in places to go out there and tell these kids, I've been where you was. I was that girl at 8 years old. I was that girl at 12 years old. I'm just that 45-year-old woman that know what them streets did, know what them drugs can do and will do if you allow them to. But you have to make a choice and say what you want, because my past doesn't define who I am today. And today, I'm in college working on my degree to go back out there and get my youth and let them know I was where you was. It's by the grace of God that I'm here today.
That's right. Thank you. I know you might have a comment before we open up.
Just a small comment. You know, you talked about Reagan and the fight on drugs. I noticed that the commercials, suddenly the alcohol has come back into commercials, making alcohol use look really sexy. You know, and I think that we have got to put the right face on, because those parties that they're showing on those commercials, those people going up and having martinis on the rooftop, I've never seen that. I don't think that really exists, because anytime I've been at a party where people have had alcohol in their hand, usually somebody's punching somebody else and somebody gets a little carried away, their emotions get it. So I think that we're showing people a facade of something that does not exist. And I don't know how those alcohol commercials crept back into our magazines and on our TVs, but I am wholly against that.
I want to say thank you very much for my panel. If you can share either a quote or a statement, something you live by for the listeners there who are listening tonight, something to leave them with. Words of hope, encouragement. I'll start off with Priscilla.
Words of hope and encouragement.
It could be
I would
one
just
word.
say, be honest to yourself and just nurture who you are. And you don't lie to anybody but yourself if you don't. So.
In the words of Ellen DeGeneres, be good to one another.
My words would be, if you can't help me grow, you have to go.
I just say that love wins overall, and brace your now. Wherever you're at, it's part of your story, and just know if you're in a tough spot, the story switches.
I would say to look outside yourself and reach out to others, because when you reach out to others and you're kind to others, it edifies you more than you would believe. So be kind to others. Look people in the eye. Say, I see you. I see you. Smile at somebody. You know, don't just walk by with your eyes on the ground. Pick them up. Smile at somebody. Let them know, I see you. You matter. And choose hope.
Awesome. I just want to thank the Groton Public Library for having this program this evening. It's been an awesome experience, and I love the dialogue that we had this evening as well. And I just want to leave you with this poem by the late Langston Hughes. He said, "What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or fester over like syrup sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode?" You see, this topic about drugs and the epidemic that we're having, this dream that we have to make sure everyone is treated as equal, that everyone deserves treatment, this dream is not going to be deferred. Because it takes all of us as a community to come together to fight this monster. And that's why it is it's a privilege and an honor to be among all of you leaders in this room this evening. And I thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to be here and to listen, to have dialogue with one another, because this is what it takes. And that's why I love our community. That's why I love our county, because this is what we do here. And this is how we're going to move forward. And we're going to make an example and be the example for Connecticut. So thank you very much for taking time out this evening. Thank you.